Thank you, Gabriel, for coming to talk to me today on the Sleep Science Friday blog. So first off, can you just sort of introduce yourself? Tell us who you are and your background.
Sure. So thank you very much, Kate, for this invitation. It would be very nice talking with you about such an interesting topic. So I am Gabriel Pires. I am a biomedical researcher, currently working at the Federal University of São Paulo and at the Sleep Institute in São Paulo, Brazil. And I also related to the Sleep Revolution project, which is related also to the European Sleep Research Society. And at this project, I take the role of a research methodologist, intending to help on the synthesis of evidence for the whole project, for the whole Sleep Revolution project.
Great. And can you just give us a very quick overview as what the sort of overall aim of the Sleep Revolution project is?
Sure. So the Sleep Revolution project is a huge project sponsored by the European Union and with the headquarters at the University of Reykjavik in Iceland. The principal investigator is the Professor Arna Farnadottir from the University of Reykjavik. And well, Sleep Revolution have several main goals, but I can try summarizing it with the intention to do some revolutions in the way we understand sleep apnea, both understanding that the current metrics are not that precise as it should be, and also understanding that we should take the patient as a major stakeholder on the diagnostic and therapeutic process of sleep apnea. So this project has a aim of bringing the protagonism of the patient into this process of therapeutics and diagnostics. That's very patient-centered.
Great. And so today we're going to talk about evidence-based sort of sleep medicine, or the evidence-based approach to sleep medicine, and sort of specifically how that is, you're using that to relate to consumer sleep technology. And so that's sort of looking at all the different sort of devices and ways that sleep can be monitored, both sort of professionally and commercially, and to try and understand what the evidence base for that and then what is needed to improve that. Is that sort of a good summation of the sort of overall topic?
Sure, sounds perfect with all the challenges involving in trying to define consumer sleep technology, but that's a fantastic topic for sure.
Great. So let's start off with what is consumer sleep technology?
Perfect. So we should understand first that we are on a decade of several revolutions on the way we deal with sleep technology. So that's artificial intelligence coming in, there are deep learning coming in, and all these new vocabulary we have to bring into our daily practice. And there are new sleep technologies being promoted every single day by new startups, by technology companies, by academic researchers developing their own technologies. So consumer sleep technologies is a part of this technological revolution. It should not be taken as synonymous of new technologies in general sense, because there are new technologies that are devoted to the medical professional. When we talk about consumer sleep technology, we should understand that these technologies should be used directly by the consumer, not a patient, a consumer, someone who felt the need to track its own sleep, or who is looking for a treatment for its own sleep symptoms. So these consumer sleep technologies basically are those that are marketed directly by the consumer, that can be used without any medical prescription, that is used in the point of care, which means at the place where the individual lives or works or wherever, but in its own place, not in a medical setting. And these devices should deliver a result or a treatment directly to the user without the need of a medical professional. So basically bypassing the need of a medical profession. And this idea of consumer sleep technology, it goes in multiple directions. So probably the most common of them are those that are intended for diagnosis. So I use these specific sleep tracker to check how much I've been sleeping, or if I snore at night, or if I have some sleep apnea. These are the most common, but there are others as well. There are things that try to monitor more specific sleep-related symptoms, such as nightmares, very specific for very specific conditions. And there are those devices that are on the other side of things, which are devices related to digital therapy. So these CBTI apps that are very common nowadays, There are some that are directly marketed directly to the consumers. There are some that are prescription-based, but we certainly have consumer sleep technology for diagnostic, for therapeutics, and for follow-up of sleep-related symptoms as well. So there are several of them being promoted.
And I guess the problem is that there's varying degrees of how well sort of validated those are, or even how they've been generated, like what sort of basis has been used or evidence base has been used to sort of generate those different technologies.
For sure. You're completely right on this perspective, because first we have to understand that sleep is a market. The number of people trying to sleep better, trying to treat their insomnia symptoms, or simply trying to track their sleep is huge. So companies, technology companies, are understanding that sleep is a huge market, and it's easier from a market perspective, from a profit perspective, to bypass medical professionals and reaching the end customers directly. So we always have to deal with this balance between profitability and social, technical, and medical responsibility. And this is very tricky indeed, because it's very hard for us as healthcare researchers, as sleep researchers, to set apart the reliable and the unreliable apps, devices, or whatever. But if this is hard for us as sleep researchers, for the patients or the consumers, it will be even harder. The consumer is not able to say, hey, this device works or this doesn't work. The consumer will be able to say, hey, this looks nice, this don't look nice, this has a nice layout, this provides me with some information, I trust. So the decision is more on the consumer experience than on clinical reliability. So we have to try working directly with the companies, directly with the consumers, and among ourselves as sleep researchers, to try to create a background of responsibility on the development and validation of these apps. Because as it currently stands, the minority of these new devices are properly validated. There are those that are not validated at all, or they maybe have some internal validation tests that never become public. There are those that are somewhat validated. I mean, some of those devices have some tests. They are not very precise on the traditional evidence-based medicine we know. So we nowadays have this thing people call real-world evidence. We have observational trials being taken as evidence. We have biased samples. We have poor controls on these devices being tested. And the large minority of them all are properly validated on randomized clinical trials compared with the proper control group. I mean, with the polysomnography, if we're talking about a sleep tracker, or compared with in-person CBTI by a sleep psychologist, if we're talking about a CBTI app. So there is a huge problem on this regard.
So that then leads us on to the work that you're sort of doing, which is then focused on trying to understand how we can build the evidence base for what works, what doesn't work, or what these apps are perhaps doing. Is that sort of right from the paper you recently published?
Yeah, that's precise. So here in Brazil, even before my work at the Sleep Revolution project, I've been always interested on both developing new sleep technology or testing technologies that are already available. So as an example, here at the Sleep Institute in Brazil, we always receive companies and startups trying to develop their products. And we try very hard to implement the best methods possible to assure that we do not engage in helping the validation of based on substandard methods. And this has been one important thing. I've been working with some digital CBTI companies as well, trying to validate them. But these are more related to one specific trial to validate one study. There are some issues on this thing, because I don't think that one single study will never be able to validate 100% something. We have to have multiple trials, decentralized, and things like that. And this makes the connection with my current work at Sleep Revolution. So in this specific paper we published this year at the Journal of Sleep Research, the idea is to have a meta-analysis on the clinical diagnostic accuracy of obstructive sleep apnea and snoring consumer sleep technology. So we know there are nowadays several new snoring and sleep apnea trackers. They are marketed directly to the consumers that use several types of technology that are from the most traditional ones, which are tracking oximetry on your fingertip, from things that might sound bizarre or unstandard, such as having a bed mattress that checks your respiratory rate and do some spectral analysis of it, and then it infers your sleep apnea index. So the technology has been has been evolving very much on it, but we actually don't know which are the best technology to track sleep apnea, which sensors actually work, for which patients these sensors work. Do it underdiagnose or lead to an overdiagnosis of sleep apnea? We don't know. And we don't know because those data are not that public or publicly available. So we thought about having a systematic review and a meta-analysis to try to synthesize the evidence on these snoring and sleep apnea trackers that are marketed directly to the consumers. But then we come into some challenges. As a research methodologist and a systematic reviewer myself, I have to understand that the traditional methods of systematic reviews doesn't work for every case. And one of the concerns we had on this paper is that we might face some kind of publication bias on trying to synthesize the evidence of consumer sleep technology. So I mentioned before to you that many of these companies, they don't publish their results as proper scientific articles. So if the articles are not published, how can I use those data to synthesize evidence? So this is something that's not standard in systematic reviews. We will contact directly the companies to say, hey, could you please provide the data for the validation of this device? And we will track those companies and this is a result by itself, to check how many companies or devices are properly supported by randomized clinical trials or are supported by proper evidence. So, and eventually we might end up concluding that we cannot even perform a systematic review and a meta-analysis because the data is so heterogeneous that we don't even know if they are comparable. I trust they might be in some cases, but at least having the idea that we have to support proper evidence-based medicine on the development of new sleep technology is something very, very important.
Absolutely. And I think it's such an interesting take to actually go to the companies that are producing these devices and apps to actually ask for that. Have you started that process? I'm curious to see or understand how willing they are to share that kind of information.
Well, I have not started that yet,
Okay.
but we can have a comparison, a very nice comparison with pharma companies. So from several years, any new randomized control trial or any trial related to a new drug being tested have to be deposited or registered somewhere before the test begins. This is very traditional on pharma-based company or in pharmacological trials. So we have to deposit that on clinicaltrials.org at the US or several other clinical trials repositories all over the world. We don't have any kind of requirement like that for new technology. Countries in a very isolated pattern, they are trying to regulate that because there is no laws or regulations whatsoever on what are the methods and whatever you have to do before starting your trial. So if I am an owner of a company, how likely would I be to publish negative results? And how the public will know that your company have tested your device and your device haven't worked out as expected on your trial if none of us know this trial have ever been performed? So this publication bias is something we have to work on. And this also calls the attention for the need of promoting good scientific practices on the development of new sleep technology. This brings the idea of what might be a real problem on the development of new sleep technology, which is the risk of conflict of interests, of sponsorship bias. When you have your device being tested by the company itself and only by the company, we might fail on some on some requirements we expected to have on properly non-conflict of interest based research done by independent scholars. So all these challenges will be tackled on this systematic review, and I hope we can share maybe how good these or how accurate these devices are, or at least say that what's the problem we see on the validation of this consumer sleep technology.
Yeah.
But for sure, regardless of the current evidence level these devices have, they are reality. The patient really wants to read something that's patient friendly. So they want to skip the polysomnography, which is not comfortable, which is not available, which is not affordable for many patients. So regardless of what is currently available for the patients, we as sleep researchers have to understand that bringing diagnostics, bringing therapeutics to the patient's place, it's mandatory whenever possible, as a matter of prioritizing patient experience on its journey.
And because the potential is so great, because one, you can reach a whole vast sort of population that we can't do with the more traditional methodologies, because, you know, polysomnography is so expensive and difficult to set up. So if we do have good, reliable, validated measures, then it, you know, opens up the huge sort of possibilities of getting good data from large populations, which is obviously a huge benefit. And as you say, like also doing something that the patients or even sort of general population sort of either enjoy or don't mind providing that data means we can get more sort of more longitudinal data, which is also going to be a huge benefit. So it's worth tackling these challenges, but I should imagine it's going to be quite a challenge.
For sure. And this problem of availability is for sure the biggest driver of these changes. So you mentioned the lack of polysomnography beds to attend the whole population that needs some diagnostics. We can go to the other way around and thinking on CBTI. So if you consider the prevalence of insomnia, and if you consider the number of board-registered sleep psychologists able to perform CBTI, you will see there's a huge gap on it. So it's easier, faster, and more affordable to develop an app that can be useful for several patients, eventually a little with efficacy is a little bit slightly reduced, but being able to reach a broader group of people, there's certainly some benefits in it. And these actually have been implemented in the UK. That's the CBTI apps in use in UK is certainly a case of success in this regard, showing that there are some benefits on implementing consumer sleep technology, even from a clinical perspective. So a clinician should say to its patient, hey, in your case, I recommend you to use this sleep app, and this might benefit you. Some apps, including, can track refractory cases of insomnia, then you are referred to a sleep psychologist. So the possibilities are huge as long as the companies entail and embrace the idea of social, clinical, and medical responsibility. As long as the sleep researchers understand how these apps and devices work, and as long as we can increase the awareness among the population about the fact that there are some reliable and there are some unreliable sleep-related devices.
Absolutely. Great. Well, thank you so much for talking to me about that. It's very interesting and I think really important work. So very much look forward to seeing what you find with all of this.
Thank you very much, Kate. It was a pleasure talking to you, and see you soon.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.